certainly. My name is Alicia Marie Petricioni Picone Rodriguez. I go by Alicia Rodriguez most of the time, or Alicia Picone, as you can see in my little box there. But my married name is Alicia Rodriguez. I am Episcopalian. I'm a member of the Episcopal Church of the United States of America in New Jersey. Okay, so I have two children. Both of them, as I like to say, were born, and when they were born, the doctor said, "Congratulations, it's a boy." That's how I describe who they are. Both of them are, they identify as homosexual. They are both in relationships, and the younger one also identifies as non-binary and or genderqueer and uses they, them pronouns. Both of my children, when they were originally growing up, tended to lean toward much more gentle activity. They did not jump into the typical, tough guy, truck boy sports activities that a lot of stereotypical boys were expected to be a part of. What I knew about them when they were born, that was basically, that is how they came out. My older one at 18 months old, when we were buying him shoes, he insisted on shoes with the Little Mermaid on them. My children, both of whom, as I said, were male or are male, probably had a larger collection of Barbie dolls than most of the girls in their neighborhood. They spent, most of their friends were girls. They leaned much more toward, performing arts than a lot. They were not interested in sports. And at a certain point, my older one, I think when he was about 2, decided that he wanted to be on stage. And so then we got them into community theater and amateur theater, which exposed them to quite and exposed me as well, actually, to a large contingent of the LGBTQ community, adult children, married men, lesbian women, and really opened up, their eyes to see that what they may be feeling inside themselves was not necessarily such a horrible thing. We have never, in my family, neither my ex-husband nor myself nor my current husband have ever questioned anything that they have done. It's when my older one came out, he woke me up at 1 o'clock in the morning to tell me that he was gay, and I smiled and said, "Okay, can I go back to sleep now?" It was nothing that surprised us. It was, I don't want to say that it didn't surprise us because my kids acted like stereotypical gay boys, but it didn't surprise us because our kids, we were always very honest with them. We told them that it was okay. We told them that, I'm sorry, my printer is making noise here. We told them that it was okay. We told them that whoever they were fine. Once they came out, it became more, they became more able to express themselves publicly. They knew that we were behind them. They knew that we supported them. My younger one, when they started college, that is when they began their actual exploration of who they were, began presenting more feminine. They began actually performing as a drag queen in certain venues. And the two of them, both of my children, are incredibly close, and they kind of feed off of each other. What I found out, what I realized about them after they came out, and I would love to take complete credit for this, but I really can't, is the level of self-confidence that they had when they went out into the world, because I raised them in a town where American football was what everybody wanted to do. And they had, they did walk the walk of being persecuted, and they just stood up to all of it. And I realized at that point how incredibly strong they were. I guess part of it is my faith. I was raised as a Roman Catholic. I joined the Episcopal Church when my older son was probably, I think, 2. And they grew up in that church, and the church that I belonged to, that I still belong to, owned a nursery school. They went to nursery school. The members of the parish were teachers in the nursery school. We lived in a very small town, so a lot of the children they went to nursery school with, they ended up going to grammar school with. It was all a very, very closely knit community. So it was also the church that I belong to, which I would love to believe is a responsibility of the denomination itself, and in many cases is, very much holds on to the Jesus represents love concept. You know, blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor, whatever the case may be. The Corinthians comment, the greatest of these is love. Also, I have to say that one of the things that I was taught very early on when I joined the Episcopal Church, and I want to say I was probably about in my early 30s, so this was, you know, a time to learn, was that the Bible was written by men, and it is then being interpreted by men, or men, women, whatever, and translated to you. And anytime you translate anything to anybody, a part of your own belief goes into that translation. So from early on, from the very first Episcopal priest that I interacted with, it was very clear to me that, you know, taking these words that say, you know, God hates you because you're gay, it makes absolutely no sense, because we don't really know exactly what those words were. There's a point where I believe it says in one of Paul's letters, women should be silent in church. And I said, you know, someone said to me, and a priest said to me, if we still held to that, we have female bishops, we have female priests, we have female, lay ministers. If we still held to that, we wouldn't have any of that. So why is it that we can hold to that? He was also one of those priests that was very much, if you're going to believe Leviticus 18:22, then I hope you don't have any tattoos, and I hope you haven't divorced your wife. So that, I will say that it was definitely the clergy that helped me to really, so that when they came out, I was like, okay, well, we're going to church tomorrow, so what are you wearing? Actually, I tend to be very confrontational. So my belief was that if it was a problem for you, you were going to have to come to me and tell me that it was a problem. I was not going to anticipate it being a problem. I was not even pregnant with my younger child when I started going to this church. And I remember when I was getting married, I've been married for 7 years, and I was getting married in my church. And I had said to my younger one, I wanted my children to give me away, and I wanted them both to wear tuxedos. And my younger one said, I don't feel comfortable. It's not what I do. I really don't want to do that. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, how about if instead of walking me down the aisle, you can be my maid of honor and you can wear whatever you want. So I got married in my church by my priest with my younger child as my maid of honor. So if you're going to have a problem with this, you're going to have to come to me and tell me that you have a problem with it. And then I'm going to start. I happen to be a scholar of gender. I have a master's degree in education, culture, and society that focuses on gender and racial discrimination. My bachelor's degree, my minor was in gender and sexuality studies, and I am an advocate through my own university for the LGBTQ community through the Office of Social Justice Education. So I have academic knowledge. So if you're going to confront me, you're going to have a discussion. And most people don't really want to have a discussion. They want to throw their criticism out there and then back away. So I've never been challenged by anybody in my congregation. As I said, most of them have known Tyler since Tyler was born. And so when they see Tyler, when we go to church and Tyler's wearing a dress and heels, they just, give Tyler a hug. Tyler's babysat for many of their children. So I do believe that it is that congregation in and of itself. I don't want to say it's unique. I don't know that it's unique, because that would say that other congregations are not as affirming, but that congregation in and of itself has been very beneficial to my kids. I would say that I think that when my children came out, I treated it as more of a cavalier. I was much more cavalier about it. I figured if I made a big deal about it, if I focused on it, if I tried to make some kind of thing about it, that they would be self-conscious and uncomfortable. And I think that if I was going to say I had any regret, it might be in not necessarily recognizing that with or without my input, they were going to have awkward and uncomfortable situations that they were going to have to deal with. So that would be my only regret, is I don't know that I was necessarily sensitive enough in the news that they had, when they came out. I don't know that I was necessarily sensitive enough to what they might be going through elsewhere in their lives, because I was so busy trying to teach them that, whatever anybody was saying negative to them, that was their problem. In watching my children grow up, I'm looking at them now and I am watching how they interact. They are both in relationships. They both live with their partners. They're dealing with their adult lives as we do when we get to that age. And I'm watching how they interact with other people, and I am watching how they treat other people. And I look at the respect and the kindness that they treat people with. My older son's partner has a nephew who is now 6 years old that has no real grandparents to speak of. And so I've kind of stepped in to be this little boy's grandmother. And I watch my son with him, and I watch how my son interacts with him. So as far as I'm concerned, what God is telling me right now is your kids are pretty awesome. They are kind, they are gentle, they do things for other people, they pay it forward, they love their family and their friends, and they love God, and they're thankful and they're grateful. So the fact that they are also gay, okay, they might have green eyes, they might have blue eyes, but there's a whole lot of people out there that I can honestly say my children are two of the kindest, most generous human beings that I've met. And I've watched them develop into that. And I know that God is with them every step of the way, and they know that. Okay, so I believe that there are always things that we struggle with as parents. In our case, it may be our children's identities or sexuality, but it could be a child's learning disabilities or a child's behavior problems, or any one of another of things that we struggle with. And what I'm finding, particularly, and because I grew up in an era without social media, without any of that, particularly in this era where we now have so much access to information, what I'm finding is that parents are definitely benefiting from seeking out other parents. I belong to at least 2 or 3 Facebook groups that specifically deal with either non-binary children, transgender children, whatever the case may be, and they are consistently, parents are consistently reaching out and asking for help, asking for support. What I find is that in a number of these cases, the parent themselves, I happened to be in a situation where I got support from my ex-husband. I should also mention that my sister's son is also gay. So we had this big joke in our family about how my niece was the only one that could carry on the family bloodline. That it was like this big joke, because it's clearly, you can't tell me that there's not something involved in the biological makeup of somebody that brings them to this point that, I never sat down and filled out a checklist to determine whether or not I was gay or straight. So I feel that if a parent is struggling, they are surrounded by a number of other people that feel the way they've been taught to feel. If I'm, and I'm not going to mention a denomination, but if I'm in a particular church that does not respond well to that, I am consistently surrounded by people that believe that there's something wrong with my child, whether it be I did something wrong or whatever the case may be, there's something wrong and it has to be fixed. I very firmly believe that by reaching out and finding other people that have the same situations that you do. Find people that are Christian, that go to church, that have a love of God, that don't want to turn away from their faith. Nobody wants to turn away from God, and nobody wants to believe that God doesn't care about them or doesn't love them. But there are other people out there that can help, just like any other fellowship or any other group. Like minds will help, and that is consistently my advice to people. Seek out resources. There are Facebook groups, there's your organization, there's I can't pronounce it, but the GSLAN, that one, there's the Trevor Project. There are all sorts of organizations out there where you can get numerous resources that will help you to understand why your child might be the way they are. And that gives you, in my opinion, a little bit more ammunition to be able to stand up to the Christian naysayers and say, you know what, my God loves my child, who is incredibly generous. Your God, according to you, loves your child that's protesting a gay boy's funeral. That, to me, makes absolutely no sense. So that's what I would say. Find help. Find somebody. Throw it out there. Throw something out on Facebook that says, hey, I'm having this struggle. Who can help me? I happen to be kind of that person in a number of areas, particularly with children that are coming out as non-binary, because I was one of the first people in my circle whose child did that. So I've had parents reach out to me and say, how would you suggest this? I've had parents that have reached out to me and then gone to my child to speak to them and get advice from them, because that's how we learn. And not everybody has the advantage that my children had of spending a good part of their childhood surrounded by actors and directors and choreographers and gay people left and right, and non-binary people and drag queens and all sorts of other things. You're concerned about your child coming out, take them to a family pride event. I've taken my grandchildren to family pride events pre-COVID, every chance that I could get. Read things like, read things by, not even academic, read things by other people that have been through what you have been through or what you're going through, and it's all out there. So that is definitely my recommendation, is asking. If you ask, you shall, as God says, ask and it shall be given to you. So that is my recommendation. And that's why I'm so glad that you're putting together this particular, because I tend to live in a very nuclear situation. I live in New Jersey. We're very blue. We're very open. My kids can wander around and do whatever they want. But for example, my last graduate class was global transgender lives. So I did a lot of study on what happens to transgender people in Iraq. And these are people whose religion is very, very, very firmly pushed into them. So, to make a long story even longer, that is my absolute, is that seek help. There are people out there that will help you, that will talk to you, that will help guide you through this. What you are being told by the guy standing up at the pulpit is not necessarily the truth. I don't believe that any human being is more qualified to speak on what God wants than I am. There is only one thing that I believe that it is very important as a parent for you to do, no matter what else you do. Love your children and make sure that your children know that when they walk through the doors of your home, they are safe, they are loved, and they are protected from the outside world. That is your job as a parent. And if you can do that, everything else will fall into place.